Phillip Kagucia is the boss at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, one of the bosses. We've had the chairman, we've had the CEO, Phillip Kagucia, we've had him here before. He's the head of asset recovery and civil litigation at the EACC. He's here today ahead of the International Anti-Corruption Day 2023 that will be commemorated on the 9th of December, like it always does. But first, here's the day's proverb. This week's proverbs are from Eritrea.
Yes. If an enemy learns your dance, he will dance it in the crooked way.
If an enemy learns your dance, he will dance it in a crooked way. Philip?
He'll subvert it.
Wow. All right, so from where I sit and the work that we do at EACC, you can imagine if our enemies, the corrupt,
learnt your dance,
learnt our tools of trade, they'll get smarter than even we are. And generally speaking, across the world, criminals are usually ahead of law enforcement. So I'm in complete agreement with that Msemo from Eritrea, that if these people learn our tricks of the trade, they'll even be better than we are at their job. Yes.
They do something to it. They bring in some changes into that dance.
They will tweak it.
They'll tweak the dance.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. The International Day of International Anti-Corruption Day is commemorated in December every year.
Yes.
Why? Why the 9th? Why December?
So there's an interesting bit of history behind this whole event. Because 20 years ago, I think member states of the United Nations came together and they said, we have to agree about how we're going to deal with this thing called corruption. And they came up with this document, this convention. This is the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. And they all converged at some place called Merida in Mexico. And after speeches and everything, they decided we are going to sign this document as a commitment to fighting corruption, because this is the first internationally binding convention against corruption, and the date was 9th of December 2003. So every year we commemorate, and to this year's theme is the United Nations Convention, which we call UNCAC. UNCAC at 20, uniting the world against corruption. So we'll be commemorating that this entire week. We have robust media engagements such as this, and we'll culminate in the main celebration in Murang'a County on 9th of December. Yes.
What shall we be looking back into the last 20 years? Last 20 years of the UNCAC and the world fighting corruption. Can we sit back and say, well, we've made significant progress, we have won, we are making strides in the fight against corruption, or have we just created more awareness on corruption?
So that's an interesting...
Fight notwithstanding.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Because, Kenya has the distinction, I don't know if it's dubious or not, but it has the distinction of being the first country to both sign and ratify the United Nations Convention Against Corruption.
We were number one on the line in Mexico.
First, in Merida, Mexico, the first people to sign and ratify were Kenyans.
Which year was this again?
2003.
No. It makes sense.
Makes sense?
No, that's why I asked when.
It was December 2003.
That, my friend, 2003 came after 2002.
Something had just happened.
Something had happened, and we were voted the most optimistic people on the planet.
Absolutely.
So that fell in. It chimed very, very well with us. Things that we wanted to get rid of. And then someone presents you with this structure. You say, bring it.
Faster.
Bring it. Where were we signing again? There. Okay, now we've signed. So what does it say?
Who signed on our behalf?
If I'm not mistaken,
Justice Minister or the Attorney General?
Yes, Minister of Justice at the time. I believe.
Yes,
possibly. If my memory serves me right. Yes.
Yeah, but that guy has when it comes to this freedom thing, he's got good CV on that one.
Okay, so we were the first in the world
Yes.
to sign and ratify,
Yes.
and to also then domesticate it.
Yes.
So
I call it a distinction. I don't know if it's dubious, because I think we are still being judged about our performance. But remember, it's not an EACC thing, it's a Republic of Kenya issue.
Yeah.
Now, 20 years ago, what did the convention say? Among the first thing it says is that you should have an agency designated to fight corruption.
Right.
Okay, and you'll find most of the member states who signed have ensured, in one form or another, they have an entity that fights corruption. So let's just start there. Okay, no United Nations Convention Against Corruption, no EACC today. However, EACC has evolved over the last 20 years. It's because the journey started in 2003. So as a start, we have an entity specialized, designated to fight corruption. And in Kenya, that is the EACC. So you start there.
But we already had an agency even before that.
Yes, and you know the fate of that agency. You know, the first
Kenya
one was called
Anti-Corruption Commission.
the first one.
Before the Kenya Anti-Corruption Commission
called
was
the authority.
The authority. Kenya Anti-Corruption Authority.
Uliifanyia nini?
Si ilipigwa na corruption.
So you understand what I'm talking about. We're living in an existential crisis. So even as we're here, the corrupt are trying to find ways of fighting back. The last time I was here, we got into a heated debate because some gentleman wants to clip our wings and amend the law. So those threats are always there. So 20 years, the fact that we have EACC and it has grown as much as it has grown over the last 20 years is testament to progress. At the time, we only had the head office over here at Integrity Center. Now we have 11 regional offices. So irrespective of where you come from in Kenya, you have an EACC office in your neighborhood. Yes.
So I think that's the thing, that oftentimes when we do things like this, when the world meets on, globe, there's global meeting, and there's ask for signing, then there's ratification, and then there's domesticating whatever it is has been talked about. Then we want to see how has the local body then that has been mandated to domesticate what was done on a global level then performed. And I think oftentimes you want to look at that. Sure, there's been the establishment of a commission. What has happened over the last 20 years that was not there before, and that we can say these are definite markers that will say yes, the fight against corruption has taken on a particular face. There's been action. It has moved. The needle has moved. What are some of those?
So if you look at the way the convention is structured, it starts with general provisions, then it has preventive measures, then it has criminalization and law enforcement. So one of the things that we did is we actually criminalized corruption. Remember, there was a prevention of corruption law from 1950 something. But in those days, it only imagined corruption as a bribe. Until we came to realize that corruption could be very many things. It could be fraud, it could be embezzlement, could be abuse of office, it could be conflict of interest. So we criminalized all those acts. Okay? And then the enforcement of it. High profile investigations, high profile prosecutions, high profile convictions, and all those are accompanied by the third part of the convention, which is asset recovery. Because it's not enough to just punish them for what they did wrong. We also have to take away the profit of the crime. And if we were to go by measures, if you went back 20 years ago, would you recollect anyone who was ever successfully prosecuted for corruption in those years?
In 2003.
You see that silence?
Not
It's
coming.
because there was
Yes.
hardly anyone.
We had high profile investigations.
That
We had
tenure.
high profile
It was,
prosecutions.
2003, no, but in the tenure of President Kibaki, one of the remarkable feats of that administration was that we witnessed one of the grandest corruption cases this country has ever seen.
I think you talk about Anglo leasing.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yes. But big as it was, names were mentioned, a few people lost their jobs.
Yes.
But you're talking about people being given a scholarship by the state in one of its many institutions of higher learning. No.
So, Phillip, are you asking about convictions or are you asking about the process?
Both, because
Just high-profile investigations, high-profile conversations, and we can talk about the Golden Bag, the commission itself, and what came out of it, and the recommendations of it,
And-
further investigations.
and tangible outcomes.
Now, that's the point.
Exactly. I think that's what Ndu was talking about when she was asking about pushing the needle. What has changed over the last 20 years? And over the last 20 years, we are seeing people who previously would have been seen as untouchables, cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, members of parliament, heads of parastatals. They were really powerful. But now they're being taken to court. They're being taken to task for their conduct or misconduct. They're actually being prosecuted, and in some cases, we have convictions. And I like repeating this because we have a sitting MP who is actually a convict. The Honourable Member of Parliament for Sirisia was actually convicted and sentenced to 67 years. And I think his fine is approaching 1 billion Kenya shillings. So those are the sort of things which I'm saying. We are dealing with marginal gains. I think sometimes when the gains are marginal, we don't realize how far we've come. So if you use that as a metric, I think we've come very far.
Philip, we have come far, but even in dealing with this matter, only marginally, we've entrenched a certain process that is slowly being accepted as the norm. And the norm is high-profile mention, high-profile court cases. In that case of the MP for Sirisia, there's a clear conviction. But other than that, the cases then go quiet. And many stay quiet. Now, when they stay quiet, we don't know what happens.
Yes.
Why I'm saying that becomes the norm. In my mind, that is far more dangerous. Because what are the optics? It is then assumed that if you are high and mighty and powerful, there'll be a song and dance about redress, justice being sought to ensure that what are your just deserts are handed over to you, but we never quite see it. So that now becomes the norm. So the problem with that is what you and the agency that you work for, you're now seen as troublemakers. You're the people who are interfering with processes, so that whenever ethics and anti-corruption come up with an issue, saying, this again. That this again arises because the end that we expect is actually not witnessed often enough. And for the optics to be powerful, we have to witness it.
And I like the fact that you use the word optics, because this is clearly a perception issue. There's a lot of hullabaloo at the beginning, because on that day, somebody has been arrested and is taking plea. So all you guys for the media will be there on that day, cameras flashing and everything. What happens when the case has a mention? What happens when the case has a hearing? Only one witness testifies. You know for a fact that prosecution may take 5 up to 10 years. In fact, one of the cases you've mentioned, the Anglo-leasing case, I think the accused persons took plea in 2016. And which year are we in now?
Lord, 2023.
And can we say that the people who have the responsibility for disseminating information to Kenyans have been paying attention to the case at every stage? No. I think it's exciting at the beginning, and then it loses momentum. But this is where we do robust media engagements. This is why I always accept an invitation to Spice, because I can come and talk about these cases as they're progressing. To the extent that I can, yes.
Sure. So, I think some of these things go hand in hand, whereby there is the work that's being done, there is the dissemination of that information in terms of the progress, but then the nature or the character of this work. Have we seen that it has changed over the last 2 decades? And I ask this because a lot of time within the governmental jurisdictions where this is taking place, there was usually the speak no evil kind of mentality that the states took on. Kenya is an example. Tanzania, Nigeria, where you could not speak against the state in terms of what was happening. So have we seen that the character has changed, whereby you're going to be bold? We saw just a couple of weeks ago that EACC leading the charge in arresting police officers on the roads who have been taking bribes for yonks. So have we seen that it has changed? Because we talk about, okay, sure, it can get boring when you're following a case. But then out of the blue, now you have highway patrol being arrested and it becomes front and center. Does the changing in the character of the kind of work that's being done then help to further the cause?
So there's a combination of things. Because we cannot attribute it solely to the efforts of the EACC. Remember, it was the KACC before the new constitution. And the constitution, I call it new, but it was Constitution 2010. So now it's 13 years. But that constitution was a game changer. It came with a lot of goodies. So one of the things we'll talk about is the press freedom, for instance, the democratic space, and something that is very critical even inside the United Nations Convention, that is the independence of institutions. So you find EACC is able independently to make a decision and say, this is our strategy and this is how we are going to execute it. Now, because of that combination of factors, then you're able to see certain things. So, for instance, you're able to see high-profile investigations, prosecutions, convictions, and asset recovery. Okay? The conversation has got it to a stage that corruption is at the center of every discourse. We are able to talk about it. I'm sure, I know CT has today's papers before him. I don't think there's any paper before page 2 doesn't have a corruption story. Yeah. And now the issue is this, is either there's more corruption or do we have more space to talk about it? And I think it's the latter, that we have greater space to discuss corruption.
Is there still a coddling of high-profile individuals because of the last thing that you mentioned, asset recovery, whereby it was, look, the general population would pay for the blood of high-profile people who are charged with or allegedly taking funds that could be used for 1, 2, 3, and that's just one aspect of corruption, like you say. But do we still see a coddling of high-profile individuals whereby, all right, so you did this, but rather than us send you to the slammer, how about we say just return the money and take a slap on the wrist and we'll be all right?
Well, that's not exactly how it works. There's two things running parallel. You have a criminal prosecution on one hand and a civil suit for the recovery of proceeds of corruption. So those are two separate paths. So it's not that because you return the money automatically
you'll end up in a criminal
you're not absolved from the criminal conviction. You may use this argument that I have returned as a mitigating factor in your criminal case, but they're not necessarily connected. So there's no really coddling. And then think about it. If you got these high-profile individuals who we call PEPs, politically exposed persons, because of their profile, if you get them to a situation where they're actually contemplating returning what they stole. You know, we used to have expressions like, kwani ni ya mama yako, I have taken it, what are you going to do about it? But now people are like, okay, hang on, I realize I've made a mistake. Supposing I return this, in what direction will this conversation go? Okay, and it's progress. And again, let me use the example of the more advanced jurisdictions. The reason they have extremely high conviction rates is because of the quality of investigations, and they push these people to a situation where the accused person says, I'll take a plea deal. Instead of going in for 10 years, I'll do 2 years, or I'll have a suspended sentence. So that is where we're headed. Remember, we're on a journey. We've only done this for 20 years. Imagine where we could be, because some of those jurisdictions have been democracies for hundreds of years.
Right.
Yes.
So, Phillip, you're telling us, yes, they may look like they're marginal, but actually, if we look at it in the bigger scale of things, cumulatively, yes, there's a lot that's been done.
There's a lot that's been done.
Public perception, though, Phillip,
yes,
has it changed in terms of the fight against corruption, or has it increased cynicism of the public on the fight against corruption? I'll tell you why. You've mentioned, the big arrests, the big prosecutions that commence, and not so many big sentencing and jail terms imposed on people. And then people start wondering, is this just, a Mwosho Moja kind of a vehicle? So once you are arrested over corruption and then it's politicized, and then people will come from your tribe and they'll say, and the case goes and fizzles out, and then later the cases drop out or the cases take long in court, and you never just completely see this person who was arrested in such a big public way being taken to jail in a similar big public way. So people just see this thing is a wash game. And that's why people now start seeing the politically exposed persons. That's what you call them.
Yes, PEPs.
The PEPs.
Yes.
One way of cleaning your name and protecting your ill-gotten wealth is to get into politics.
Yes.
From the private sector, you are corrupt, you've corrupted the systems in government, they're coming for you, get into politics, get into parliament, you're protected. If you're in government, get into politics, you're protected. We see that being a clamor. So do you think the public perception has improved in terms of confidence in the fight against corruption?
Well, that's interesting, because you may have noticed an elevated level of engagement with the media generally. Okay, that is why we are always accessible to the fourth estate when they want information and when they need somebody to come and talk about corruption. I used to spend quite a bit of time in the comment section. And if you want to go into therapy for mental health, read the comments. But the truth is, the comments were overtly hostile at the beginning. We couldn't post an achievement without somebody saying, but what about this? But what about this? But why haven't you done this? And it was almost 90% negative. I would challenge you to go into your phone and look at EACC on X. For sure, there'll always be a negative comment, but the percentage, it's changing. So whereas it would be 90% negative, right now we're about 50% because there are people who are beginning to understand exactly what we are doing and the enormity of the task.
And why are we understanding it better, Phillip?
It is because we are actually delivering their results.
Not delivering only, you are talking about it.
Yes.
So people know. If you do it and we don't know, as far as we're concerned, it's never happened.
Yes.
But there's something else. You see, for me, even this conversation that we are having at this point in time and in the public, there's nothing that, in my mind, shows the great strides we've made. That one can actually speak. Before you speak, and you know for sure you'll be picked up. For sure. Go ahead, say it, but you'll be picked up. Now, there's a generation that have never experienced that. They actually don't know that is what used to happen.
City, there are people who are voters who were born when there was multi-partyism in Kenya.
Yes.
And they are 30.
Yes.
They are 30 today. They don't know that there was a different ecosystem before.
They don't. And also, when you see court rulings, there was a time when it was really an anomaly when there was a judgment that seemed to go against the government.
Yes.
Now it's not an anomaly.
Have you seen the recent ones that have come from the Anti-Corruption Economic Crimes Division, where we, even including the EACC, and we get some criticism if we made a mistake. The question is, how do you treat the criticism? Do you feel bad about it or do you improve?
You learn from it.
Absolutely.
Public perception, again.
Yes, back to perception.
Big corruption cases.
Yes.
So we'll start with, there's Goldenberg, there's Anglo Leasing, there's NYS 1, NYS 2, there's KEMSA, there's Maize.
There's Aurora, there's Kimware.
Yeah. How many people are in jail from any of these big corruption cases?
So the responsibility for adjudication really doesn't lie with the EACC, because the most we can do is present the facts. And the prosecutor will prosecute the case to the best of his or her ability. The independent fact finder might be the one to say, well, I don't think you have met the threshold. We may agree, we may disagree, and in many occasions we are actually appealing those decisions. But the truth of the matter is there are quite a number of convictions. I think what people are looking for is that one huge high-profile conviction. But then again, I say, will that really address corruption or will it assuage your perception? Because sometimes that is where the problem is.
Both.
You have a feeling that this person is corrupted. If this person, I'm sorry, I don't mean city, I'm just...
No, Phillip, feel free. Just
It's a perception issue.
Just
That
keep
unless
pointing in my direction.
City can control your perception of it.
Yes, exactly. I don't know what it is you know, but I want to assure you.
There's this feeling that unless CT is put away for 20 years, then there is no genuine fight against corruption, which is not the truth. But it's perception. And perception also there's the local perception at domestic level. But remember, the metric that is used to assess the fight against corruption is an international metric. So there's a local, the domestic one, where our fellow Kenyans maybe feel we're not doing enough. But if you look outside and you use the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index over the last 5 years, because remember, it's still a perception index. 2018, we were positioned, I think, 144 out of 180.
144 out of
144 out of 180.
Is 180 good?
180 is worst perception.
Okay.
180 is maybe North Korea. I don't know.
So 180 is worst perception.
Yes.
Okay.
Lowest score. Okay. But in 2018, so when at 144, in 2019 we moved up to 137. Okay.
Okay.
In 2020 we moved up to 123rd. In 2021, we slipped back to 130. But in the last assessment, which is 2022, we are now back up to 122. So this 122 out of 180 is the highest we've ever been.
Who are we paying?
Or not paying?
Phillip, who have we spoken to?
Yeah. What sets, and I think it's interesting, because then what sets the parameters then for this kinds of, for this particular framework? And who is the one who decides that this is what we're going to use and this is what we're going to check based on? Because if we look at what the globe is saying in terms of perceptions when it comes to the fight against corruption, and how we've done this over the years, then what does it speak to agencies who are working on corruption in the country? And it could be a DCI, it could be EACC, the police, all of these individuals. When you say that a country has dropped a certain number of places, does that mean that the fight against corruption then has waned? Or are we saying that there are people who are becoming more emboldened when it comes to participating in corruption?
Let me preface that by saying that the perception index is really, it's critiqued by scholars because it is a perception index, which means it depends on who you ask. Okay, it's not like the FIFA football rankings where we know because we got beat 7-0 the other day, that is where we've dropped in the rankings.
Yes.
That's different because there's empirical data.
Yes.
For the perception index, what they rely on heavily are proxy indicators. And one of the indicators is like press freedom. Okay? Because the ability of the media to talk about corruption is a contributor to the fight against corruption. What you guys may not know is that sometimes we get the information from you, the media, because somebody will write in that little box, I think it's called palaver or word on the street, I don't know, corridors or whatever, and then we'll say a Nairobi member of parliament is living lavish, he has a house in Dubai, then we'll pick it up from there. Okay, so press freedom is one of the proxy indicators. The other one is a democratic space. So and they rely on sources like the economists have an intelligence unit, the economist intelligence unit. And what about the people who are investing in the country? Now, this is where it gets tricky. If we bring on board, let's say, what's Elon Musk's company called? Tesla. Yes, supposing Tesla were to open up here.
I thought even this X is his.
Yes.
So which one?
Everything is his now.
Many things.
So supposing Tesla were to set up here and they brought those wazungus to come here and they were stopped by the traffic over nimesikia ukitaja Salga, maybe at Salga they find the traffic there.
There's always traffic at traffic
police.
Always, yes.
Can you imagine that person's perception? They have never been asked for a bribe for 50 years of their existence, and they come to Kenya and at JKIA, as they are coming in with their suitcases, they are being told to unpack everything. So that perception might be negative. So you have to be very careful. But notwithstanding all those qualifiers I've given about the perception index, we are still going up on that metric. Yes.
It's still changing.
It's improving, not just changing.
It's improving.
Yes.
But I still want to come back onto this one. You see, when people see the big corruption cases, big corruption involves big influential persons in society. And if those big influential persons in society, like City keeps saying, the leadership matters. If the perception is that the leader or the big people in society can walk away and get away scot-free, then there's nothing that will come and tell the people at the bottom about corruption. So that's why I said we have Goldenberg, we have Anglo Leasing, we have NYS1, we have NYS2, we have KEMSA, we have all these other corruption cases that have taken place. Now we have fertilizer, we have, edible oil, we have... If people just keep seeing, okay, yeah, there's a big case here, there's many governors who are being arrested, being taken to court, but then it ends there, does that injure the perception, and does it hamper your work?
Well, certainly if it's an issue of perception, it will affect it negatively. But can you honestly say that all those cases, those people have gone scot-free? Because at some point, they've encountered the force of the law in one way or another. Whether it's on the day they were required to record statements, whether it's on the day they were required to supply documents, whether it's on the day a search was conducted at their premises, at one point or another, they have encountered the force of the law. In addition to that, because the prosecution, the threshold for criminal prosecution is so high, we are getting more wins on the civil side where we're taking away the profits. And mind you, for some criminals, that hurts them more than the actual prosecution. Because the only reason people engage in corruption is to make money. So you can imagine, on the one hand, you're prosecuting them, but on the other hand, you're actually taking away the money, which means it is a disincentive. Okay? So I don't believe that they're coming away scot-free. And if the argument is that they're being acquitted, the other way of looking at it is we have an independent fact finder who is the adjudicator, who is a judiciary, who has determined the case within the confines of the rule of law, and has said he may have done something, but I don't think you have met the threshold. And because all you need to do is to raise reasonable doubt, as soon as there's reasonable doubt, I am going to acquit. Now, what is the bigger picture? The bigger picture is that the judiciary remains independent.
That's true.
Yes.
And that you take a solid case before the judiciary.
Yes.
Which is why I'm asking again, have we seen any top-level governor losing their, which are now being taken to jail? Because that one would make us all feel happy if they go to jail. But let's say they have not gone to jail, but they have lost their property. Have we seen a principal secretary, a cabinet secretary lose their property? Have we seen a top civil servant at senior level losing their property? Publicly, yes. Because of any of these cases?
I can respond to that easy.
Please tell us.
As
Remind
we speak,
us.
Right now, there's at least, I think, 10 governors in court. Okay?
Lost.
Criminal cases, prosecution.
Prosecution, okay.
Which is...
Sitting governor?
Yes. Well, sitting and past governors, right?
Prosecution,
which is a bit more complicated because it's prosecution, and as I told you, the threshold is high. But in terms of the assets being recovered, you're aware, Ferdinand Ndungu Waititu has a case in court. I think Mwangi Weria has a case in court.
No. We're talking about actual losing property.
And that's what I'm talking about, civil matters.
Yes.
So it
concluded
might be...
to, Waluke has concluded,
yes.
And he's been sentenced, and he's been convicted and sentenced. Now we're talking about, in the civil cases, top-level, high-level individual personality,
yes,
who you've taken to court, and the court has agreed with you and said, return 2 billion shillings.
Specifically for governors, the cases are not yet concluded, but I've given you examples of matters which are ongoing. So, former Kiambu Governor Waititu is in court. Former Nairobi Governor Kidero is in court in a civil matter. Lenol Kulal Samburu in court in a civil matter. I think Muranga Mwangi Wairia in a civil matter. And this is just off the top of my head. So these are cases which are ongoing. And I would challenge any Kenyan right now, whoever is listening, go into your Google and just write Waititu asset recovery case or forfeiture of unexplained wealth, and the facts will come out. The only thing that hasn't happened is some of those matters have not been concluded.
They do, but herein lies the problem, that even with the independence of some of our institutions, or like the judiciary, that independence has a negative tinge to it, in that if you are talking about a country where the rule of impunity seems to be a growth industry, then it'll spread everywhere. So everyone within their enclave, since we were exchanging examples, like for instance the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, like Phillip here, because of his docket, okay?
Point one more time.
Yes, Phillip here. If we are talking about the rule of impunity, see, we're talking about individuals, but the overarching thinking and ethos behind all of it, an anti-ethos really, is impunity. It will be found in each and every of these institutions. Why? Because what is prevalent and what drives us is not the rule of law. No, but understanding is that we can take advantage of it. So, I am a court officer. I am a security officer. I am a high-ranking government official. I will present the optics, and I will speak the words that show that I am for justice and I'm anti-corruption. But that will not be my practice. Now, why then it becomes for me a subject of great concern is that everybody else watches. Just like when you're a grown-up, your children watch you more than you think or you know, and they observe you. In the same way, the wananchi observe, and we replicate what we see the leaders doing. So they can say all they like. They can tell us how they are honest men. They can tell us how they will fight corruption. But we watch and we say, what on earth is this person talking about? Yeah. So when you now tell us about court cases, we're thinking, okay, Phillip, we've heard that one before. Yeah, it's fine.
Kwanza court cases, as an example. In September last year, all right, Kasarani, never again Shall we see this and the other politicization of the war against corruption? You see, when the topmost office bearers of the Republic say that the fight against corruption is now becoming a political tool, it just points directly at you and your office. But you don't even respond to that. What do you say to that?
So I will start with City's observation, and I think that is actually a greater danger to us as a society in Kenya.
Yes.
Because of the culture of impunity. And let me tell you, no amount of law enforcement will treat the culture of impunity. If the reason you don't steal is because you're afraid of being apprehended, that is not a good reason. You don't steal because it is wrong to steal, and that is a bigger problem. I think you may have heard this, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we could have the best strategic plan, like we launched ours recently, 2023, 2028. It's a great strategic plan, but if we don't change the culture, I don't know how we'll be dealing with this. 1 year ago, I think you interviewed me just before the elections, and you kept asking us, why aren't we blocking people from getting out of the ballot? And I told you, it is of the way the legal framework is set up. It gives these people every opportunity to stay in office. Now, what happened a couple of weeks ago? EACC made some recommendations, and some people have had to leave office. So can we say we are going in the right direction? Can we say that is a bold move? And mind you, we are busy being sued. I'm busy defending those cases in court with my team. But we've taken a bold move of saying these people have integrity issues. Can you ask them to step aside? Yes.
While this is being investigated.
Phillip, I'm sorry, but I see politics in it. Immediately I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, I remember Uhuru Kenyatta addressing Parliament and saying that EACC have given him some files and that people are going to leave his government. Where are those people?
But those are two very different scenarios.
Ministers, PSs, files taken from the EACC to the president. There were integrity questions. They were being investigated. Can they leave office? Similar thing. Ministers, PS, senior officers, file taken by EACC to the president. President says, take action. Can you leave office?
But therein lies the problem. Why is the president taking the file? Because you're actually interfering with the independence of that institution. Because we then believe that until the president speaks, why do you have in independent institutions the president has to speak on everything? He has his duties.
It should be automatic.
We should know. Yes, and someone should whisper and tell him, President, this one, you don't speak on this one. Those guys are the one that's their job. And if you speak, you're speaking as a citizen now, or you're interfering with what it is that they're supposed to do. See, this speaks of that culture that hasn't gone away. We are still behaving as though we are a single-party state and thinking, is that mkubwa akisema, when the big boss says that, and you're thinking, but this, the whole point was to move away from this, so that those institutions have the power. So you know that when, for instance, Ethics and Corruption give us a list of people who should not vie for any public office because they've done due diligence, and then they all go and vie.
And nobody says anything.
I think the risk here is to diminish the effort of the agency, because the agency has done what it can within the law,
and what it
which
ought
is to say, yes, exactly. And we recommend and we say, under the Leadership and Integrity Act, because these people, the following, have a list of integrity issues, ask them to step aside.
Okay.
Yes.
Deterrence is often a big issue, and just looking at some of the stuff that's discussed on a global scale, that once you see one or two or three individuals or entities that have been made an example of, that will deter others from going in that direction in the future. Now, you raise an interesting point when you talk about, are you not doing this thing because it is wrong, or are you not doing this thing because you do not want to get caught? What would be the preference moving forward in the fight against corruption? Do you want people to not do it at all? It doesn't matter what the reasons are? Or are we looking to go a little bit more into the moral sphere, where we say, actually don't do it because it's wrong, not just because you don't want to get caught? Then where does deterrence play in all of this?
Yeah, and I think there are two competing issues. There's the morality aspect of it and the legality. So if we use technical arguments, these people will remain in office, for instance. But on a moral basis, they really ought not to be there.
They shouldn't.
And one of the examples I like using is, for instance, how we automatically use safety belts the moment we get into the car. When I was a child, nobody cared. And I remember distinctly, nobody actually cared about safety belts. But now the moment you go into the car, almost by instinct, you pull the safety belt. Okay? Because you can shape the culture. You can change the narrative. You can change the mindset. Same thing with littering. When you're going to Nakuru city, when we get to the Gilgil toll station, what do you see people doing with yogurt packets? Everybody out of the window, out of the window. And I'm saying, if we can't even deal with a basic thing like littering, how are we going to deal with a complex thing like corruption? Okay? But that culture can change. I don't know what we're going to do about that because that's not my mandate, but we can have a culture change about everything, including corruption.
Some cultures are encouraged to change.
Yes.
Example of seat belts. Vehicle manufacturers are encouraging that culture change. You get into the vehicle, it starts moving, the noise in that car will force you to put on your seatbelt.
Some vehicles won't even move.
Yeah. So now it becomes a normal thing that, to avoid the kelele that will come out of here, let me just put on my seatbelt. So some cultures are encouraged to change.
Incentivized even.
Incentivized. So for example, if you take a senior person like a minister and
Danny,
lock them in.
But that's
Or
that's
take
just
their
one-
publicly known wealth. Nyumba hii ilikuwa so and so, it's no longer theirs. Now there, my friend.
people know, yes.
Let's be honest. You guys know very well. Right next to you, over here behind Panari, we recovered 54 acres.
Oh, you did?
Yes, 54 acres, which is now the site for construction of affordable housing. Okay, so not just the recovery, because the recovery we could say is an ego thing for us because we
So you
recovered
recovered it,
it.
then gave it to the government to build the house.
Houses. So
Absolutely, it was public land.
It belongs to the
So,
government.
so I'm
it's
wondering
public land.
where the recovery was.
Sorry, Philip.
Go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
please.
let's think about this.
Yeah.
We do remember that affordable housing was one of the key pillars in the previous regime.
Yes.
Under the Big Four.
Yes.
And I don't think just because the regime changed that housing stopped being an issue. It's still an issue.
It's going to be an issue for quite a long time to come.
Okay, because if you look at the statistics, I think we need 150,000 houses per year, and we're only managing to do 10,000.
And
So
we're urbanizing
we're
very
behind.
fast.
Okay, if we get 54 acres from industrialists who have grabbed it behind Panari, and we say we have recovered it, it was a meteorological land, 54 acres.
Actually, it was remarkable.
Yes.
But if it's meteorological land, why on earth are we building houses? Are we saying the Met don't need it anymore?
You have to rationalize every decision. You have to say, do they need 54 acres, or at this point in time, what is the bigger issue? Same thing for, and I know you know this because you spent a lot of time in Mombasa, Pale Buxton. It had been grabbed. We recovered it.
In fact, if you look at Buxton, that land goes up to the stadium, okay? And all the land that you have custom houses and what have you, it was part of that. So you're right, yes.
Absolutely. And now there's houses affordable,
Yes.
once again, in Mombasa County. And I think the boss, the CEO, Major Mbarak, was there 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
So those are the kind of examples. So there's tangible examples. And what I would like to encourage is, rather than focus on what... It's almost like saying I've been served a dish but it has no meat. You were hungry, you hadn't eaten. Please eat what I have today. Let me go back and work. I'll come back with meat next time. That's all I'm saying.
And we are saying, instead of making it all cabbage, just a piece of meat would help.
Once in a while. Hata matumbo ni nyama.
So let's look and appreciate the strides that have been made.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's why we are so keen to share the information that we have as we're doing the media engagements, building up to the International Anti-Corruption Day on the 9th of December. And again, looking at what was set out in the United Nations Convention, I believe we've aligned what we are doing with that international convention.
I wish we got like a big, conviction this week, between today, tomorrow and Friday. Big one, like giant, somebody who's just... Anyway, thank you very much, Phillip, for joining us. And congratulate everybody at the Commission for the work that they're doing, all right?
Thank you so much.
Never give up.
Absolutely.
And we shall never give up because we pay you so that you can do the work, and we have to remind you that. Phillip Kagucia is the head of asset recovery and civil litigation at the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. On the 9th of December, we'll be commemorating the International Anti-Corruption Day, 20 years of the UN Convention Against Corruption, looking back at the strides that have been made. Keep it here for more conversations.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.